Okay, so the next presentation is actually my presentation, and I'm actually splitting this into two parts because I have an opportunity to talk with you all tomorrow or Thursday on our field trip. So the first part of the presentation, when I talk about where the U.S. Forest Service has been going in developing our forest soil moisture monitoring network and our relationships, I want to talk about this very exciting partnership that we have with the Natural Resource Conservation Service. This project has grown tremendously in the last 3 years. We have outstanding national leadership from Sky Wills, our NRCS national leader for soils research, and my supervisor, Dr. Cynthia West, with the U.S. Forest Service, and she's the director for the Northern Research Station, as well as the director for our Forest Products Lab. There are numerous scientists and collaborators involved in this project at this point. And Jason was very kind in announcing this collaborative award that I'll be receiving this year from NRCS and the Soil Survey Division. But that award is actually not only going to me, but my team, which encompasses almost 20 U.S. Forest Service researchers, and then an additional as many collaborators at universities, and then the team behind us that supports us day in, day out at NRCS. So the success of this effort isn't just based on my leadership, it's based on the collaboration of all of these great scientists and leaders. And we have this overall goal and what brings us together, and it's to install, monitor, and generate spatially distributed long-term data sets of soil moisture across forested watersheds, and really to support this new type of soil survey, the dynamic soil survey efforts and digital soil survey, in creating products related to the soil hydroclimate. The first project endeavor that we broke out upon is was with experimental forests. And I'm going to talk about each one of these projects here in the following slides. We have funding for new projects that are coming on board this year, $1.44 million to support a brand new effort in Alaska and at the Marcel Experimental Forest, which is where the very famous spruce experiment is happening. And that's an acronym. So you need to look that up. That's ran by Dr. Randy Kolka. And also the Marcel Experimental Forest is overseen by Dr. Stephen Sebastian, and that's where he's been monitoring soil moisture there for decades, and we're bringing that project online. And then I would be remiss if I didn't talk about some of our satellite projects, such as Devendra and his work at Santee Experimental Forests. Experimental forests are really special in the sense that they are set-aside land bases, federal land bases, where they are highly manipulated and controlled with research objectives, goals, and management. So some of the background, why we're even doing this, we have climate change. It's shifting our precipitation regimes. We're talking a lot about drought here today. Flooding is equally as important when it comes to soil moisture and being able to predict and understand what's going to happen on the landscape with flood predictions, as well as what happens post floods with soil moisture in changing landscapes. It's very critical, as you just heard from our panel, about storing and linking hydrologic response to changes in precipitation. That includes the snowpack. We know that the knowledge and monitoring of that spatial and temporal variation is lacking, especially in these forested landscapes, but also range and pasture lands. When we think about management across the West, we rarely talk about those range and pasture lands in the kind of setting that they are, with the sagebrush and some of the grasses out there. And how many head of cattle or livestock can you put, per acre out there compared to what you can do in the East? In the East, when we think about grazing, we think about pasture management, and we might have 10 animal units per acre, as opposed to needing to 1,000 acres to support 10 animal units out West. So very juxtaposed positions as far as the kind of knowledge that we need to know. So the USDA has been coming together, and this is an interagency effort to model soil moisture and look at soil moisture models with relationship to the soil survey products. Our our goal, our objective is to build these spatial explicit models so that at varying scales. Because what we've learned in the last several years is we're pretty good at that really fine scale. We can take soil moisture sensors out there. We can have people go out and check them. We can advise maybe forest management operations where we're having harvesting going on and we have go, no go operations because it's too wet to harvest and we'd have damage on the landscape from heavy equipment. We're getting pretty good at the watershed level and looking at that. And then we have national levels and global levels where we are willing to accept remote sensing data to give an overall assessment of maybe vast regions of our nation or vast regions of the world. But how are we doing on those landscape levels that are beyond, that encompass multiple watersheds? I don't think we're doing so great right now. So we need to be able to deal with this issue of scale. And so those modeling efforts are looking at expanded data collection through this monitoring network. And we're currently just working on federal lands in our partnership. Here's some summary of what I just said. Why do we need to do this? Well, we need to accurately predict soil. We need to improve our ability. We know it's sparse on forests. We have dense vegetation. You just heard Peter in our panel describe about these challenging, complex relationships. PRISM data never capture those steep side slopes that we have in the Central Appalachians. We've got really terrible issues with that. Modeling approaches are useful, but they rely heavily on the data. So what data source are you using? Mike gave us a great example of when that matters and what kind of reliability that we need. So determining whether new methods of creating soil maps results in more accurate soil moisture prediction may prove to be useful. Okay, so this is our longest effort thus far. It's the Coweta Hydrologic Laboratory. This is in North Carolina. Here's some information about this. Basically, these are the projects, my role in all of this work that I'm about to show you. These slides were created by the scientists that gave the presentation at our quarterly meeting. This is Dr. Chris Oishi. And Amanda Panino is my major collaborator. She provided a lot of assistance in creating these slides and leading that logistical meeting. So I just want to give credit where credit's due. And again, this is part of that team that I talked about. But this is what Coweta is made of as far as an experimental forest. It's got long-term data records, 1934. That's pretty amazing these days. We're almost up to a century. These experimental forests have a research focus where they have parts of the watershed that have been harvested in various manners, have different type of land management applications, and then they've been monitoring them over time. So this has a network. Coweta has a network of 5 climate stations and 9 precipitation gauges, water chemistry data, and you saw that is another area, the Soil Moisture Monitoring Network, our national collaborative, where we want to go into chemistry and start looking at that. So we actually have opportunity to do that. The Furneaux is another experimental forest, as well as Hubbard Brook. We'll talk about that here in a minute. They too have long-term water chemistry data sets. You have long-term veg plots, and you have soil sample archives. And soil sample archives are becoming extremely valuable to go back in time and do baseline comparisons with new data. This is the dynamic soil survey project that was head initially by Tiffany Allen, who is now our national federal liaison. She helps us broker our collaborations between NRCS and Forest Service, but she also works with the BLM and the Park Service and the Bureau of Indian Affairs and USGS and other federal entities that are interested in doing soil survey work with NRCS. We could not do our work successfully without her liaisoning. She's been tremendous in bringing along our ability to work with soil survey offices and get help and assistance from the MLR, the Major Land Resource Area offices. So here's some information about what this soil survey looked like before and how it's advanced through this new technology. of the development of a raster soil survey and raster-based product. I talked about Chris. This was Chris's original presentation. Aaron Rooney is our lead researcher here who oversees this project for us and brings us together about twice a month. They furthered now, there's been a series of spinoff of research projects that we're now doing with Coweta between Forest Service and NRCS, looking at soil carbon dynamics and some other really amazing efforts with mineral weathering, microbial communities. We know microbial communities are really important with regard to soil carbon and soil moisture and nutrient availability and so forth. So work is growing. That's what a collaboration will do for you. It's leveraging that next step of once you have good baseline data and good working relationships and people that really like each other and want to work together, then they can do more work together. So notable features about the Coweta experimental forest, it's got deep water tables. And when I say deep, I mean not just 8 feet, but 15 feet plus. Those are some deep colluvial soils there in that part of the Southern Appalachians. It's got an active carbon sink and it has large storm events. Think about the hurricanes that come up out of the Gulf Coast or come up from the Atlantic and they ride the spine of the Appalachians. They go all the way up and then even strengthen and reform in a way of not being a hurricane, but being an incredible precip maker. Think about what happened in New England, that over and over again, where Vermont and New Hampshire get tens of inches of rain from some of these systems. This is some field work that was done at Coweta. So the soil moisture sensors that went in for this project started in 2022. Battery replacement's a big deal, folks, when you are doing in situ monitoring in remote locations and forests. We have meetings that are all about batteries. And then data gaps because you didn't pay attention to your battery life. Now, what do you do? And on top of that, we have a lot of meetings about animals and bears and humans and what are they doing to our remote sensors. Erin, here's another one of those projects that Erin's talking about. So this is the pour water sampling effort that she wants to do in this summer. So this is, I'm going to make a plug right now. So my postdoc and someone I've had the pleasure of working with for 3 years, Dr. Carlos Quintero, is here with us this week. He has a poster highlighting some of these findings with his work with the model rhesus. He is now a subject matter expert with this model. In the last 3 years, he's had the pleasure of working with the developer and the special rhesus group and the rhesus users out there. And he just attended a conference. And I really recommend you stopping in because he's a great listener and he likes to learn from you too. I'm very proud of his work and his postdoc will end with us in September. So it's been a pleasure to have him as part of our team. Another experimental forest that we've been funding effort and have a new soil survey product for is Hubbard Brook. And Amanda Pinino from NRCS, she is our research leader there. And some of you may know Dr. Scott Bailey, who is recently retired, and he is a volunteer. And we hire him on as an ACES, or after our research scientist retires within our agency, we can bring them back on through special funding to help. But this project is he gave an amazing presentation a couple years ago about hydropodology and the concept of what hydropodology is. And he developed some concepts that NRCS has been working with and helping him to establish new soil survey there. This is a long-term ecological research site, the LTERs. They're found across the nation. It's within the White Mountain National Forest. And there's some stats about the precip. Here's some background. This is a glaciated till system. A lot of spodosols, one of my favorite soil series. High variation in groundwater flux, and it influences the spatial arrangement of the podzol type. And you can see this really well displayed in this diagram. How almost you see the profile of the podzol, the spodosol going down slope. We got great field support up there through NRCS. There's an MLRA office up there, and their research interests are continuing the soil moisture modeling. Carlos has moved on to look at some of this data in the last part of the summer. The soil water balance and the vegetation dynamics is very intriguing to those scientists. Dr. Mark Green is one of the scientists that works there. And then we have disturbances. And so they do snowpack studies up there because there is enough snow and ground cover up in this area, although climate change is influencing that. So you do have these periods of reduction of snowpack, and then the soils freeze, as opposed to the soils were not freezing in the past. And Hubbard Brook is infamous for its experiments where they send grad students out in the middle of winter to shovel snow off of plots to expose them and do comparative studies. You see a lot of cold students in the wintertime shoveling snow in the middle of the woods. And then soil moisture dynamics as a predictor of soil type and function. That goes back to the Podzol studies. Here is the distribution of sensors that just went out in 2023. Their target locations with a variety of soil types. They're doing 3 to 4 month data downloads with the assistance of NRCS office. And bear activity has been tremendous up there. They've really been battling bears. They've been doing, they plan for some potential site upgrades this summer. And they're doing pressure transducers. And then, so this comes back to the relationship with groundwater that we've been seeing people talk about with us today. And there's some existing wells. And so new wells and doing some comparative analyses with some historical research that's been going on at Hubbard Brook. This is where they'd like to do here's some new work. So one of my longtime collaborators, Dr. Russell Briggs at SUNY, Syracuse, and he's out of the environmental science college, and Nathan Young, who is a collaborator, research hydrologist and modeler. They have put in money for funding and have been awarded about $500,000 this year to look at landscapes and petoscale soil water predictions using the model DHSVM. So there's another model for you. And how does it work compared to RESIS? This will have the ability to ingest NRCS data and look at the horizon level soil water fluxes as opposed to depth. It'll have snowpack accumulation and limitations on trafficability. So what does that really mean? So this comes back to some of the interests of why is U.S. Forest Service interested in soil moisture data at the fine scale? Well, we think soil moisture data is what's going to help us determine, like, when is it a go, no-go situation with climate change to have harvesting going on in winter months. Many of our northern states do most of their harvesting in the winter when the ground is frozen. And this is no longer the condition, and it is impacting our ability to let our contracts operate the way they're supposed to, which in turn affects economics. And that is almost always what this comes down to in operations. It's how do we continue to support the economy of managing timber on federal lands and doing it in a sustainable manner, in meeting our mission for sustainable land management. So we have mesoscale measurements of soil moisture, and they would like to look at using drones to assess that, and point scale data to larger scale. This gets back to the projects that are now looking at the variations in scale. Okay, here's the Fresno experimental forest. So I've walked this landscape for decades as a former forest soil scientist for the Monongahela National Forest. So my collaborator there is Dr. Ben Raw. He is a research soil scientist hydrologist, and he gets his field support from the MLRA office from Jim Leonard and Megan Thomas. So the Fresno's in the Monongahela, and it's primarily in septisols with high rock fragment content. So that's why you've been seeing me in the last 2 days say, what do we do about rocks? What do we do about rocks? What are you going to do with rocks? Why doesn't this equipment work with rocks? What happens if you hit a rock? Because that's forest soils, and we know that challenge. And then you see the responses. It's everybody else knows the challenges that are there too. And it is one of the biggest hurdles in taking soil sensors that are being actively used in agricultural settings and moving them further up into the watershed and the headwater systems where there is sometimes 70% to 80% rock, but you hear the water flowing just beneath your feet. So you know it is an important part of watershed dynamics and the soil water relationship. So they installed their sensors in 2022 and 6 sensors with each profile, which is a little bit more intensive than some of our other sites that only had 3 sensors per profile. And they're working on more this year, right now, actually. And then here is their proposed field work. So they are looking at the soil plant atmosphere continuum. And this project received about $100,000 this fiscal year for continuations. They are actually going to put up a tower. And they'll be connecting this with plant physiology. And this is part of this leveraging that I was talking about with, taking one project and looking for additional new partners. And they'll be doing that at West Virginia University. Their future model efforts. So again, here you see this rhesus, the desire to continue with rhesus, but then look at this additional DHSVM model. And they'll be connecting spatial data with point scale measurements as well. And that's the tower that I was talking about. And then they're also going to collaborate with Mike, our subject matter expert. Now, one of the goals was, because I worked for the Northern Research Station and my part of my job, 25% of it was national, is once we established this model of how to work together in the East, how are we going to work together out West? And where are we going to do that work? Well, I was fortunate enough that Dr. Ben Raw introduced me to Jackson Leonard and Sally Diamond. And Jackson Leonard and Sally Diamond are just fantastic collaborators. They do it so well. They have an amazing doctoral student, Emery Ellis. They is always on it. Comes to every meeting with a fabulous presentation to let us know where they is with all of their work. So these slides are attributed to their work. The partition contribution of different sources for stream flow, small scale spatial temporal availability and soil moisture, and model soil water storage and transport are their research objectives. This is Workman Creek in the Sierra Ancha Experimental Forest in Arizona. This is where they're looking at. So they have a headwater catchment drainage, 3 subcatchments, and they have inceptisols as well. But their annual temperatures, you can see it gets pretty cold there. They do have snowpack, and then it gets pretty dry at the end of the season. And they have data going back to the 1960s to help them look at land management and land management influences. So they're pretty rigorous in their work. They do biweekly sampling. And they have water chemistry. Again, you are now seeing that we are incorporating water chemistry into soil moisture, into our soil moisture work. They have a second project, and this might interest a lot of you because, one of the things that we saw yesterday at Campbell Scientific, we looked at the need to homogenize the soil. Well, this is what it looks like when you don't do that, because now you are looking at hotspots and what creates those hotspots in soil moisture measurement. And this is very interesting work to me because they are actually acknowledging the heterogeneity of the soil. They have a third project looking at modeling soil moisture. So as you can see, all these projects look at modeling. To determine soil water storage and transport pathways at the hill slope and subcatchment scale, fine scale. And Travis Nauman is the NRCS researcher that is helping them develop their research studies and plans. And I forgot to mention that Sally Diamond is at the University of Northern Arizona. She's our collaborator there. So those are the projects that have been active. The next project, which I do not have a slide of, is we're going to Alaska next year. That is almost a $700,000 effort to set up the work on the experimental forests in Alaska. and work with Dr. Dave Diamore with the Pacific Northern Research Station, and actually work with Jackie Foss, who is our soil scientist on the Tongass National Forest. And we're going to start looking more and more at Alaska, because we understand that the climate change in Alaska is a very real thing. Those forests are large, they produce a lot of timber, and their ability to manage is highly based on what is the condition of the soil. How frozen is it? How frozen is it not? That's where our jelly soils are. And what does it look like as the soil moisture regime changes in Alaska? So I'm very excited that I'll be able to present information to you all next year on that project, as well as the Marcel project that has approximately 25 years of existing soil moisture data. We're going to be hiring a postdoc through ORISE to do that work. So if any of you are looking for your next path in life, that position will be open through the ORISE announcements. One of the efforts that we have acknowledged coming out of this is we better do something with data. And we better, what's my wish for the National Coordinated Soil Moisture Monitoring Network? It is data management, and to help us figure out, how do we store our soil moisture data? How do we make it publicly accessible? Because this is not like the soil moisture data that is online, real time, and available for you at a click of the finger. It is data that gets downloaded, goes on someone's laptop, goes to a storage unit. And now we want to bring that into a comprehensive database that is publicly accessible. And we have an ORISE fellow who is a data management specialist, and that's her training. Emily Pichet, she just finished up a project with long-term soil productivity in forests and developing a public-facing website for that and data management system. And she'll be doing the same thing for soil moisture. So I'm pretty pleased to announce that to you all today. So with that, I'm going to end. And I will talk to you about RAWs in the field on Thursday and what we're doing with our network with RAWs. But are there any questions? Excellent. That means I answered them all. But you know where I'm at. You know how to reach me if you need me. I'm pretty accessible, and I answer all my emails pretty timely. Oh, I didn't even see you behind there. I'm so sorry, because I was blocked by the screen.
What is the soil surface in tundra Alaska? What's your criterion?
Yeah, that's a question for Jackie Foss. So here's the thing about being a national coordinator. I've never been to Alaska. It's on my bucket list. So I'm going to go find out. Seriously, I've not been there, but I think Mike Kosh, he pretty much knows a lot. Do you know? Oh, you have another question. No, but what we need, so I don't know, because I've not been up there to see where there is. And it's different depending upon where we're doing active management versus restoration versus, our wilderness areas. Alaska has a tremendous amount of wilderness areas. Well, we will never manage. So, and the National Park Service is up there as well. But you are looking at feet of peat in a lot of areas. And one of the things I've noticed with soil moisture is that, peat is its own category as well, just like I talked about grasslands and forest lands, And the thing about peat is it may be that hidden demon, holding soil moisture, holding soil carbon, and as we have climate change, that if we don't take advantage of learning what's going on with peat systems, and that is what the Spruce project is that Dr. Randy Kolka oversees, and Marcel, where it's instrumented with soil moisture sensors. I expect that project to reveal some information about these peat systems that are prevalent up in Alaska as well. Because I can't see it because I'm presenting.
Yeah. So Amy Amans asks, thank you, Stephanie, for the presentation, for your work on this front and verbalizing the need for in situ forest soil moisture data, not just in the West. As a Forest Service soil scientist in the upper Great Lakes, I'm hungry to get this information so that I can work with the timber staff to incorporate into forest management. So perhaps can you talk about some of the applications?
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about this in the presentation on Thursday out in the field. So when you talk about so that's what we need to do. Like, that's one of the next steps. Once we have the networks in place, and we understand you know, in collaboration with remote sensing and validating and collaborating remote sensing going forward as it gets better, because I do think that is the wave of the future. We would want to be able to use soil moisture data to inform management recommendations such as prescribe fire. To me, that's one of the no-brainers. You know, is it a go green, is it a go light, or is it a red? We already have an example in the Deep South in Alabama where the state was monitoring soil moisture for forest management and was getting ready to set a prescribed fire. And lo and behold, someone looked into the soil moisture data and identified a flash drought. And so they said, no, we're not going to conduct this prescribed burn. And they really feel like they prevented a catastrophic situation that they would have been unprepared for. So fire management is huge. That trafficability application, you know, rutting, pulling things out. And, you know, how far away are we are we from actually putting this into forest plans, forest planning? It's not exactly right around the corner, but I would hope that it would be within the next 5 to 10 years that we would be able to do these applications. Recreation management. The Forest Service has many special use permits where we work with ski resorts. And I have a great need from my Colorado forest soil scientists that want soil moisture sensors and on the White River National Forest to work in areas like Aspen, Breckenridge, and so forth, where we have permits for special use for ski resorts and what kind of management should go on there and what does it look like. So that's the recreation aspect. I also believe that there's a role with what we saw with the forecasting of runoff and timing for boating and permits and either delaying that. ATV use, which now is UTV, utility vehicle use. We still permit that on national forests. Another application that actually NOAA has funded is our Kentucky, our Daniel Boone National Forest. Some of you saw Claudia Cotton speak last year. She was the keynote speaker and talked about the importance of soil moisture management and understanding where white oak distribution occurs. Well, why do we all care about white oak? Anybody got a guess? Anybody know? Maybe your favorite beverage before you go to bed, a little bit of bourbon. So white oak is extremely important, dependent on soil moisture and the quality of those white oak forests. So knowing where to use silviculture prescriptions to have more white oak prevalent versus non-white oak prevalent, like where would you get that? Could be a soil moisture recommendation. Thank you, Amy, for that question. And with that, I'm going to go ahead, Scott. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. 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 Yep. 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 Okay, so that was Dr. Scott Jones, one of our host here today. He wants to know, like, what criteria went into putting all these soil moisture sensors out there, and how did we establish which sensors we would use and knowing the limitations? Well, you know, really the best person in this room to answer that question is Dr. Carlos Quintero. Carlos, do you want to talk a little bit about that before we move on? Can you do that for me? I'm going to bring you the mic. Okay. Okay, there you go. Not a long answer. That was what convenience. You know, what did NRCS have available at the time that the project was embarked on? And then how did they learn along the way? So now I will tell you, when we talk about RAWs on Thursday in the field trip, it's one sensor only, one sensor across the entire country. And that's because that's what the National Interagency Fire Center says it's going to be. And those are Stevens hydroprobes. And they're not everybody's favorite, but that is what the standardization in the network requires. Those meetings that we have on those monthly basis, we talk about those topics, about which sensors and so forth. We use some of the information too in conversations that, like Todd Codwell put together that information about soil moisture selection and how did we do that. So this is an area of the science that we are all talking about right now. And some of it, We have a national technology development project that's about to have some findings. That is Mohammed Nash and Catherine Zern did a comparative study of soil moisture sensors in forest soils. And it was not research, it's applied management. It's out of our engineering division of our agency. And I will be sure to share that document when it comes out with our NCSMMN network, which would go up on our website, because I think that's really important information. Okay, now I'm going to table that and go to Mike.
So looking at the schedule, and we have some flexibility locally. So the snacks and break are ready now. So why not take a break now? And we will reconvene. We have everybody will still be in the same order.